And now, friends, on this holy day, let us gather in peace and unity. Let us be one before the grace and grandeur of life. Let us be as children before its mystery and seekers of its wisdom. Let us proclaim goodness as our gospel and hope as our strength and service as our responsibility to neighbor and stranger. In this hour, may we know anew the holy joy of human lives growing together in love and care, so that this hour will imbue all those to come with that sacred awareness. Come, let us worship together.
Today's chalice lighting comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Cultivate the habit of being grateful for every good thing that comes to you, and to give thanks continuously. And because all things have contributed to your advancement, you should include all things in your gratitude. The focus of today's message, the hungry ghosts from the Buddhist tradition and their mindset of greed, addiction, compulsion, and dissatisfaction, is thankfully difficult for me to relate to in a meaningful way. Sure, I'm addicted to coffee and am often caught buying way too expensive clothes online by my very understanding husband. But I'm extremely grateful to not suffer from a seriously debilitating addiction like drugs or alcohol. And my compulsion to shop is nothing compared to that of someone who has a compulsion to gamble. I can, however, relate to that feeling of dissatisfaction. I've mentioned before that I teach at the Peabody Conservatory, which is connected to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. I need to be in Baltimore 4 days a week, so I travel down very early on a Monday morning, stay overnight, return on Tuesday, and repeat the same drill on Thursday and Friday. I really love my job, which is to teach students how to look at a piece of music, analyze it very quickly, and perform it without having a chance to practice it first. This is called sight reading, a very useful skill to have as a musician, since we're often called to play weddings or recording sessions without having had a chance to look at the music ahead of time. Dare I say, I often sight read when I play piano here at UCP, since I don't have time to practice. All this to say, I'm very grateful to have a job I'm qualified to perform and truly enjoy doing. But I absolutely despise the commute and the fact that I have to spend money on a hotel twice a week and put tons of mileage on my car and be away from my family. It's exhausting, to say the least, and the guilt I feel being away from my family is at times overwhelming. So even though I love my students and colleagues at Peabody, I've been looking for a new job that's closer to home. Recently, I was in the final round for a job at the Manhattan School of Music. It was the perfect job, head of sight reading at a school comparable in prestige to Peabody and within striking distance of home. There were 3 rounds of interviews and teaching, all of which went really well. I thought for sure that the job was mine. But alas, it was not meant to be, and the disappointment I felt was crushing. I went through most of the stages of grief: denial, anger, depression, and finally acceptance. I went through them again, each time coming to the acceptance stage a bit more quickly and a bit more resignedly. And now I'm realizing that I didn't really know what that job would have been like. For all I know, it could have been a crazy amount of work. I could have had to go to New York City every single day, which wouldn't have been an easy commute either. My thinking that the grass would have been greener could have been way off base. So I'm trying to be grateful for what I do have: a great job at a great school with lovely students and fantastic colleagues. Sure, I have to make that commute, but in a world where many people can't find a job at all or don't like their job, I'm pretty lucky. To return to the chalice lighting quote, as I think it bears repeating, cultivate the habit of being grateful for every good thing that comes to you and to give thanks continuously. And because all things have contributed to your advancement, you should include all things in your gratitude. In other words, don't be a hungry ghost.
Once there was a town with many wise elders and enough food and water to go around, and then some. The town was visited by a group of traveling monks who had vowed poverty and lived off of the charity provided by others, often strangers. The poverty vow was intended to keep their minds and hearts pure. That discipline would allow them to focus on matters of the spirit rather than the flesh, and it was believed that the presence of these wise, holy ones brought good karma and better behavior to wherever they visited. And so the towns that they visited usually offered them ample food and water and tried to make their stays as comfortable as a group of ascetic monks would like them to be. This town was led differently, though. The elders, 500 of them in the story, instructed the townspeople to not provide any food and water for these monks. The elders worried that if they offered support, other monks would follow, and soon they would just spend their days providing hospitality to strangers. Now, this story is rooted in Buddhism, and in Buddhism, as well as in many major religions, offering hospitality to strangers is easily one of the best things you can do. It's not weighed exactly the same in terms of piety across faiths, but it's consistently very good to be hospitable to strangers. It makes whatever god or gods we're talking about very happy when we do this. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Taoism, all sorts of earth-based and indigenous systems, faith after faith after faith, exhort believers to be welcoming and hospitable, to protect the stranger traveling through a strange land, to offer food and beverage and shelter without exception. They do this directly with instructions from prophets and faith leaders and voices on high, and indirectly with stories and parables about what befalls people and animals and beings who do not offer hospitality, and what befalls them, whether it's the violently inhospitable ancients of Sodom and Gomorrah or the seemingly innocent fig tree that failed to provide fruit for Jesus when he wanted it, is a curse. Sodom and Gomorrah are wiped off the face of the earth. That fig tree will produce no fruit at all after having not produced it when Jesus was hungry. And in the case of the 500 elders of that town, they all go to a place called the realm of the hungry ghosts. The realm is one of 6 in an existential cycle of rebirth and reincarnation. 3 of the realms are good: the God realm, the demigod realm, and the human realm. And 3 are bad: the hell realm, the animal realm, and the hungry ghost realm. And where you go depends on where you live, or how you live, excuse me. And if you don't offer hospitality to strangers, you're going to end up in one of the bad ones, probably the realm of hungry ghosts, where you'll live unhappily for a cycle of existence before dying again and coming back in a different realm. The hungry ghosts are visually depicted as emaciated, with big, bloated, empty bellies. They constantly crave and can never be full. They are miserable and live in the clutches of an anxious scarcity that makes that cycle of existence barely endurable. They always hunger. They're never satisfied. They can never be satisfied. And whatever sustenance they get becomes part of an ongoing craving. And so the more they get, the more they desire. The more that desire can't be met, and the more miserable they become. Desire and attachment are 2 vices in Buddhism. They are to be avoided or countered with increasing wisdom and spiritual discipline. They both lead to suffering. Desire for that which one doesn't have leads to anxiety and ingratitude for what one does have. And attachment to what one does have leads to material ego and the inappreciation of impermanence. And so these central vices in Buddhism are the chief qualities of the realm of hungry ghosts: hunger, desire, attachment. You will live in heightened expressions of those states for that cycle of being, and it'll happen because you lived in smaller versions of those states on earth. This isn't the kind of hunger that we appreciate and lift up as virtuous in our faith and other prophetic faiths today. The hunger for justice, for love, for truth, for compassion, for kindness. This isn't the kind of hunger Jesus lifts up in Matthew, for example. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. That teaching, that beatitude, frames the hunger as something that fills the world with a certain virtue. It isn't a hunger for something that builds the fortune or ego of one person, or a kind of hunger that leads to the gluttonous and stingy amassing of resources that are not shared with others who hunger, others like traveling monks who live in poverty and need some food and water. that virtuous hunger is for something that feeds others now and into the future. And it's a hunger passed down from one prophetic generation to one prophetic generation from earlier prophetic generations who saw their neighbors and the strangers, their needs, and oriented their lives and communities and traditions of faith around meeting them. There is good hunger in the world, a holy hunger that, when fed, blesses far and wide and without exception. The hunger of the 500, though, was just greed and scarcity thinking and hearts that were hardened to the needs of others passing through their town. Their hunger was a border that closed them off from the stranger, and that led to one of the bad realms in the next cycle of existence for them, where they had to endure living in the clutches of that vice in an even worse way. Our Buddhist friends today treat this whole story very psychically. All of these realms of existence, cherished and important pieces of a larger cosmology, are most often used practically to reflect on how we live today. Other realms of existence and reflection upon what happens in them after we die and before we are born are meant to inform how we live in this realm, the one that we can affect right now. And so the point, not always but often, is to imagine the realm of the hungry ghosts not as something to avoid later, but as something to avoid now. Just as universalists came to believe that hell and heaven were best used in the pursuit of a virtuous life if they were considered to be earthly experiences, so too do many Buddhists use stories, pictures, and ideas of other cycles of being to live better lives right now. And so the question becomes, how do we stay away from the realm of hungry ghosts right now? What are we hungering and thirsting for that will harm us? And how, knowing that, can we live better? Gabor Mate, a doctor and Canadian author, uses the imagery of the hungry ghosts in a deeply informing, sensitive, and impactful book about addiction. Titled In the Realm of the Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction, Mate uses hunger as expressed in the realm to see addiction as an attempt to ease pain, a sense of loneliness, a lack of purpose, to ease anything that detracts from life. The substance or focus of addiction becomes a substitute for what is missing, which creates a tragic cycle in which people try to ease a hunger using a substance that will never do so, at least not in a destructive way. The hunger the substance seeks to meet is a hunger the substance can never meet. And so the person spirals into more and more isolation and shame and scarcity. And this is why, according to Mate, so many different things can become addictive. The substance is important in the sense of how one treats the addiction, but the larger pattern, understood, can address the condition on a more holistic level, which is what he does in the book in a very human, sensitive, and thoughtful way. And just so that you're not misled, the book is really about addiction. The realm of the hungry ghost part is in the title, and it's used as a metaphor in the book, but it's not a book about Buddhism or the Wheel of Life. There are plenty of those out there, though. I can recommend some if you like them. Mate's positioning of that realm is being reflective of what's going on with addiction through means that use the response to addiction to name the real hunger and find other ways to meet it. And those ways include therapy and professional help, but also include pushing back against larger social stigmas about addiction that portray the condition as a sign of weakness or simply one who makes poor choices. It's neither of those. It's a condition that reflects a kind of pain or disassociation or loneliness. And to ease that pain, as all of us would want to, some end up developing unhealthy addictions that can become destructive. And the way to heal from all of that, in Mate's mind, is connection and listening and unpacking what one really feels and fears, and that for which one really hungers. We all have a role in this, Mate believes, in the compassion and sensitivity and thoughtfulness that we bring to discussions of addiction when they come up. For the substance worsens the addiction, that is true, just as hunger worsens hunger for beings in the realm of the hungry ghosts. But social shame and social stigmas and a certain casual cruelness or lack of information about addiction also worsens that realm, not in another state of being or existence, but in this one right now. And so the miseries of that realm right here and right now are social products. It's not just one person and a matter of control. Addiction, and certainly recovery from addiction, has a social, or as we would say, an interconnected element. Or we all create the realm of the hungry ghosts. It's not the failure of one, it's our turning away from one another that leads to more pain, more isolation, and more of the bad kind of hunger. Mate wants us all to invest in building a more human, holier, and holistic response to addiction, and his construct is easily applied to other areas of life as well. When we try to feed a hunger for justice with an addiction to social media, or we try to feed the need for love with a sequence of not so great romantic interests, or we try to feed the need for connection by desperately clutching friendships that have not served us well in a while, we're kind of creating that realm in the here and now. We know a hunger, but we're turning towards something that will never feed it. And the more we try, the hungrier we get. The Buddhists would say, don't be so attached to begin with. Remember impermanence. Remember everything goes away. Remember non-attachment is the key to lessening suffering. And remember that that is possible to begin with. The great heartbeat of Buddhism isn't really that our nature is one of suffering. It's that suffering can be eased and even erased. That's why I think Buddhism is at heart an optimistic and supremely hopeful religion. It doesn't stop at dread or even the sort of nihilism that says everything is awful. It starts there, but it says it can be better, and here is how. The key to that is to not be attached, which inevitably leads us to suffering. Attachment does, which is in the end kind of everything. Another approach, and Mate goes here, but so do many contemporary Buddhists who also use the realm of the hungry ghost to comment on addiction and greed and compulsion, which is a pretty frequent lens to express hunger Another approach, and Mate goes here, but so do many contemporary Buddhists who also use the realm of hungry ghost to comment on addiction and compulsion, is to express the hunger mindfully and then to meet that hunger healthily. So the hunger for justice might not be met so much through a Twitter or Facebook addiction, but by organizing outreach and building coalitions. A hunger for love might not be met by never being single, but by being single until someone worthy of one's love comes into their lives. A hunger for connection might not be met through toxic friendships, but by ending them so that there is space for new, healthier friendships to form. Ridding one's self of that which leaves us hungrier and hungrier in whatever aspect of life that happens can be terrifying because we've come to depend on that for a sense of who we are. But over time, with the right circle of friends, with some prayer or meditation or movement of some sort, and maybe with a professional, the space that opens up when we come to know that for which we really hunger and what might ease that hunger can be the beginning of a new and healthier life. And we can make that easier on each other by destigmatizing addiction broadly, or celebrating one another's turns toward health and wholeness, and by feeding one another with kindness and support. Which is how I imagine those desperate souls, those children of God, those hungry, hungry people in their lower realm eventually getting out of it. In my non-Buddhist mind, and highly metaphorical, thoroughly non-literal approach to all things afterlife related, I imagine them moving out of that realm when they start feeding each other. It's like that old story about hell being full of hungry people and endless soup, but the handles are too long for people to feed themselves, and so they waste away. But heaven is the exact same place where they've learned to feed one another with those long-handled spoons. I blend that image with the realm of the hungry ghosts and come to believe that our greatest hunger is one that we can only meet together. Our great hunger, holy and human, will take all of us, all of our kindness, all of our listening, all of our big, open, tender hearts to meet. And when we do that, that realm of the hungry ghosts will be empty, and the world will be full of peace and compassion and abundance. May we build that world together today and tomorrow. May it be so, and amen. Thank you again for attending worship with UU Princeton this morning. After the benediction, we invite you to stick around online for a few moments of connection and fellowship. We'll unmute and turn on the chat, and we can all check in with each other. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of greater love and beauty and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always and always with neighbor and stranger by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.